Good morning, my dear learners. I am Go'zal Eshchanova, a senior teacher of English at Tashkent Institute of Irrigation and Agricultural Mechanization Engineers. It's a pleasure to conduct this session with you today. If you remember, in our previous session we talked about agriculture-related English, and today we'll have a talk about irrigation, which is the main branch of agriculture. So let me start today's session, the title of which is called Teaching English for Specific Purposes, Irrigation. It's not a secret to anyone that nowadays in every part of the world there are a lot of learners that are learning irrigation for specific purposes. What's your personal opinion? Is irrigation-oriented English really important for such students? Yes, why not? I think that students learning their specialty-related English can achieve more goals in their sphere. And that's why, for meeting the requirements of labor market, English can be taught through irrigation. For gaining international experience, for implementing advanced technology over the world, it's really important. As a warm-up activity, I chose several illustrations which can easily lead you to the topic of our discussion today. You can see different pictures that show different types of irrigation that exist in the world. I think that having basic knowledge about irrigation will help you to realize this field. Now, let me draw your attention to the short video about irrigation, and then after watching it, we'll continue our discussion on this topic. It's not a secret to anyone that irrigation water is essential for keeping fruits, vegetables, and grains growing to feed the world's population, and this has been a constant for thousands of years. Throughout the world, irrigation, water for agriculture or growing crops, is probably the most important use of water, except for drinking and washing. Almost 60% of freshwater withdrawals go towards irrigation uses. Large-scale farming couldn't provide food for the world's large populations without the irrigation of crop fields by water got from rivers and lakes. Without irrigation, crops could never be grown. Do you know what is drip irrigation and how does it function? Drip irrigation, also known as trickle irrigation, functions as its name signs. The water in this system follows drop by drop, just at the position of roots. Water is delivered at or near the root zone of plants, drop by drop. It's important to manage this process properly, that the method can be the most water-efficient method of irrigation. It's known that various types of irrigation techniques, methods differ in how the water obtained from the source distributed within the field. In general, the goal is to supply the entire field with water so that each plant has the amount of water it needs, neither too much nor too little. Drip irrigation, spray or micro-sprinkle irrigation, and bubble irrigation belong to the category of irrigation methods. So, the main objectives of our session are given in the slide. Step by step, we'll analyze and discuss them. Firstly, we'll talk about irrigation-oriented English. It's about introduction to irrigation. And then let me give brief information about usage of past tenses in irrigation. And at the last point, some effective techniques which are used in irrigation-oriented English. So let me move to the next slide. It's about irrigation-oriented English. Anytime when we use the term irrigation, the first thing that comes to our mind is what can be the real meaning of the term irrigation? From what language was it taken? And what does it mean? Have you ever thought about that? From the etymological point of view, irrigation, taken from the Latin language, irrigatus, means watering, supplying water to land, and leading water into fields. And now let me move to the next slide. It's about different synonyms of irrigation. Of course, while you search different forms of irrigation, you can see that they have different forms and they can be used in different contexts as they have similar meanings. For instance, to such synonyms we can include watering, sprinkling, dripping, and they can be used in several sentences. And it would be also useful for learners to learn some words that can identify opposite meanings of the term irrigation, I mean antonyms, given in the slide. And now, let me move to the next slide. Anytime when you use the term irrigation, you will start thinking about what definition can be used for describing this term. Now, let me move to the real world of irrigation. It's important to know the definition of any kind of term while learning and researching. I recommend you to learn the definition of the term rather than working with word-for-word translation. According to the information taken from Wikipedia, irrigation is the application of controlled amounts of water to plants at needed intervals. What's more important, irrigation has uses in crop production, protection against frost, and preventing soil consolidation. Talking about irrigation, it's important to mention that it can be widely used in different purposes. Irrigation usage is important in growing agricultural products, in preventing soil and maintaining landscapes and others. Talking about the usage of irrigation, it's essential to acknowledge that irrigation can be used widely for several purposes. Let me give brief information about them. Irrigation can be used effectively in growing agricultural crops, in maintaining landscapes and others. And now about types of irrigation systems. There are several types of it, starting from low technique irrigation, high technique irrigation, irrigation of lateral move, surface irrigation, drip irrigation, and sprinkling irrigation. And now I think it's high time to talk about environmental impact of irrigation. Talking about types of environmental impact of irrigation, it's important to mention that there are two different parts of it. The first one is direct environmental impact of irrigation, and the second one is indirect environmental impact of irrigation. What can be the difference between them? Yes, you are completely right. From one side, direct environmental impact includes the following: instability in atmosphere, increased evaporation, and others. From the other side, indirect environmental impact includes the following: socioeconomic impacts, ecological damage, waterlogging, and others. Let me just give brief information about the advantages of irrigation. It starts from growing agricultural crops, increasing food production, protection against drought, mixed cropping. All these express that irrigation is the basis of all economies and societies across the globe. Being an ESP teacher at Non-Philological Institute requires from all of us to teach English through the content. I mean, teaching grammar and vocabulary through specialism. That's why in every hour lessons we try to design and conduct our lessons by context-based materials. We'll talk about usage of past tenses in irrigation. It's not a secret to anyone, past tenses can be explained through 4 types. First one is past simple, second, past continuous, third, past perfect, and last one, past perfect continuous. Let me start from the first one. Past simple is used to talk about completed actions at a certain time in the past. For the formation of past simple, please follow the structure: subject plus verb to plus object. In negative form, subject didn't plus verb 1 plus object. And in question form, did plus subject plus verb 1 and object. If you paid attention, only in positive form we used verb 2. In negative and in question forms, as we are using the second form of the verb do, I mean did, there is no need to use second forms of action verbs. Farmers used irrigation systems long ago. Farmers didn't use irrigation systems long ago. Did farmers use irrigation systems long ago? In the given slide, you can see several action verbs for you to practice past simple. I hope that these verbs can be helpful for you for differentiating past simple from other tenses. Now, let me move to the next slide. In the given slide, we'll practice past continuous tense. What kind of action does this tense express? Past continuous tense expresses the action happening at a certain time in the past. For the formation of past continuous, we should follow the structure: subject plus was, were, plus verb 1 and ing and object. For the negative form, you should follow the structure: subject plus was, were, plus not plus verb 1 and ing and object. And in question form, was, were, you should put before the subject, then verb 1 and ing plus object. Anytime when we use continuous tenses, we know that to the first form of the verbs we usually use ing. It's also called present participle forms of the verb. And to show the continuous actions, it's important to use auxiliary verbs. Here we use the second form of the verb to be in the forms as was and were. Now let me give some samples. Farmers were using irrigation systems from 1967 to 1977. Farmers were not using irrigation systems from 1967 to 1977. Were farmers using irrigation systems from 1967 to 1977? In this slide, you can see different action verbs for you to practice. As the third form of past tenses, we are starting here with past perfect. Think about what action can past perfect express? Yes, you are right. Past perfect is usually used for describing completed actions that happened before another action in the past. The first action should be expressed in past perfect. As key words of this tense can be used such words as when, by the time, and before. Don't forget to follow the structure. Subject plus had plus verb 3 plus object. Had plus subject plus verb 3 and object. Here, let me give brief information about verbs in past perfect. If you paid attention, here as an auxiliary verb, we used had. It is the second form of the verb have. And by verb 3, we mean past participle. And it's important to differentiate the types of verbs also. I mean regular and irregular verbs. Now it's high time to give some samples. Farmers had used irrigation systems by 1990. Farmers hadn't used irrigation systems by 1990. Had farmers used irrigation systems by 1990. For you to practice, there are several action verbs given below the slide. Now it's time to finish with past tenses. Past perfect continuous expresses the action happening at a certain time in the past and continued up at a certain point in the past. For the formation of past perfect continuous, you should follow the structure. Subject plus had plus been plus verb 1 and ing and plus object. In negative form, you should follow the structure subject plus had plus been plus verb 1 and ing and object. And in question form, had plus subject plus been plus verb 1 and ing plus object. In past perfect continuous, we are using two auxiliary verbs such as had and been. Now, let me give some examples. Farmers had been using irrigation systems by 1990. Farmers hadn't been using irrigation systems by 1990. Had farmers been using irrigation systems by 1990. For learning irrigation-oriented English, it's useful to use effective techniques in learning and teaching. For helping my learners, I decided to choose several activities. In this slide, you can see the usage of regular verbs. In the activity, ask to fill the spaces with suitable regular verbs. While dividing the verbs into two types, to our mind comes the first question. What is the difference between regular verbs and irregular verbs? Please think about that. Let me give some examples. To irrigate, irrigated, irrigated. To plant, planted, planted. If you paid attention, second and third forms of regular verbs are similar. Let me give some examples. If you wrote your answers, now let me show you correct answers for you to check. And in the given activity, you are asked to fill the spaces with the suitable forms of irregular verbs. Spend 3 or 5 minutes for filling the spaces. When you finish this activity, I'll give you the chance to check your answers with the correct ones. The last reading activity. In the given slide, you can see the extract in which you are asked to fill the spaces with terms and verbs. For you to help, I express it in two colors, green and red. By red color, I wanted you to pay attention to choose the right options from terms. And by using green color words, you should think about using right forms of verbs. And in the reading activity, draw your attention to the usage of verbs. During the session today, we tried to use different effective techniques. Before concluding my speech, let me inform that from the acquired session above, you could learn something about irrigation-oriented English. Let me explain your home assignment for the next lesson. It's comprehension checking assessment. In the given slide, you can see I'm going to explain your home assignment for the next session, comprehension checking assessment. In the given slide, you can see different photos of Tashkent Institute of Irrigation and Agricultural Mechanization engineers. Your task is to describe and write the description by comparing these photos. I prepared in the next slide the useful phrases for you to help for comparing, describing, using the right tenses anytime when you work hard on experiencing your English language. Please remember the famous quotation, "Knowledge of language is the doorway to wisdom." Let me wish you good luck. Instead of saying goodbye, this time I decided to use another expression because I hope to see you very soon. See you!